This Voice of San Diego podcast is sponsored in part by the Downtown San Diego Partnership. As a nonprofit news organization, Voice of San Diego depends on our members, foundations, and sponsors like the Downtown San Diego Partnership. We are very grateful for all of our supporters and will recognize their support during the show. In San Diego's urban core, you can feel a downtown that is changing, innovating, finding itself. A downtown that is growing upward and into the future. To become part of Downtown's story, visit createthefuturesd.com. And if you like Voice of San Diego's work and want to become a sponsor, contact us at development@voiceofsandiego.org.
Welcome to the Voice of San Diego podcast, where we make sense of local politics, schools, housing, public safety, the civic issues that impact the life of a San Diego resident. We break it down so you can understand it and make educated decisions.
Everything that goes into our investigative reporting, the journalists, public records requests, the data crunching, and this very show depends on the support of people like you because we're a nonprofit news organization. Enjoy the show.
Okay, welcome to those of you listening on News Radio 600 Kogo. My name is Scott Lewis. I'm here with my friend, Sara Libby.
Hello.
You're alive.
I'm back.
You are an actual person.
It's me.
How's it? How's things? How's Teddy?
Teddy's great.
Yeah?
Doing great. Doing baby things.
Do you have, you're part of the club now, the parents club?
Yeah.
I didn't send your certificate. Yours came electronically.
I know.
You know, but you feel it?
I do. I very much feel it.
Do you feel that constant fear that something's wrong and you can't put your finger on it?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, it's part of it, I guess. Hasn't gone away yet for me. Andy is off. He's taking opening day. This is recording on Thursday, opening day for baseball. It's somewhat of a holiday for some of us. He's out. But I am very pleased to have you back. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm glad to be back.
Did you get any significant insights about the world while you were taking care of little Teddy?
You know, I feel like everything I heard about pregnancy and about parenting was not true. And
the
then
whole thing.
Yeah, well, a lot of things. And then there was all this stuff that you never knew to expect that was true instead.
Like what?
For me, I hate to even say this at the risk of jinxing it, but my baby sleeps a lot all the time and it's magical.
Yeah.
But then there's just other things that you never knew. Is he spitting up too much? It seems like a lot, but maybe it's not a lot, and all the things like that.
There's a lot of
just
questions.
A lot of weird problems.
Yeah, there's no all the books and stuff. They don't answer the questions you actually have, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Poop consistency. Those are things you start to worry about. It's just a whole new world that I never knew was out there.
So these days, my son's been eating a lot more. He didn't like to eat for a long time now, so I'll make him a plate of eggs and I'll just eat them. Then I'm just like, this is the glorious thing I've ever watched happen. Just because you want him to eat and live, and that's the whole point. Well, welcome back. We're thrilled to have you. This week, we've got a great show. We got Christian Ramirez. He's running for City Council District 8. We've got Chris Kate coming in the studio next week. We've got politics report you should pay attention to. We're going to switch it up a little bit. It's going to go on Saturdays. What we learned, of course, is going to be back. What we learned this week by Sara Libby. On Sundays, you're going to be back to typing. You remember how to type?
At it. Oh, yeah, I learned a lot of things.
That's true. You probably have a list. And then, of course, the podcast group on Facebook. Pay attention to that. We're going to run through several stories today. And, of course, we got our heroes and goats. But the first story was one we broke yesterday. And this has to do with, earlier this week, Orange County's Board of Supervisors made headlines when they voted to join with the Trump administration in its suit against the state of California over 3 new laws that limit law enforcement coordination with federal immigration authorities. So let's step back for just a sec, because what are those laws?
So the one that is the most famous, I suppose, is SB 54. People know it as the sanctuary state law. That's not the actual name of it. But, it just essentially limits how local law enforcement can coordinate with federal immigration officials. But then there's two other that do similar things. One prohibits private employers from allowing federal inspectors onto work sites. And then there's another one that creates a inspection system for detention facilities.
Yeah.
And so they're all wrapped up in this same concept of limiting coordination.
I tried to follow the legal arguments and analyses of these, and it seems like the one that really stands out is this enforcement access to work sites issue, like that these employers can be held responsible if they cooperate with immigration agents who come in and inspect. And that's one of those that may be perhaps the most vulnerable to Trump's challenge, but also the one that everybody's sort of focusing on. But let's be honest, this is really a giant signaling fest, right?
Oh, of course. Yeah.
On the California side and on Trump's side. Like there's a lot, we're going to protect immigrants, we're going to fight, we're going to really do the, and the actual laws are about very specific circumstances of cooperation, and cooperation already exists in this meta sense. They all work together on these same servers. It's all a mess.
I mean, California's attorney general was essentially appointed to be the signaler in chief of California, and that's what he's doing by filing all these lawsuits against the Trump administration. So it's going both ways. Yeah,
and then back the other way. Like it's just, when you call it the sanctuary state law, then the Trump's attacking it. It's all very simple to everybody's watching it. But when you get actually into the meat of everything, it's kind of an entanglement. There's so much that the federal government can do if you get a warrant, which is what all of these are based on. And they can do so much anyway within so close to the boundaries of the actual border. So anyway, so what you guys did is my Srikrishnan went out and asked whether locals like county supervisors here might consider joining. They're all Republican.
Yeah, so Orange County's Board of Supervisors is all Republican. So is San Diego's. And so she just approached all the county supervisors and said, would you consider something along the lines of what Orange County's doing? And actually the board chairwoman, Kristen Gaspar, told her, as a matter of fact, we've already slated a discussion of joining. It's going to be in closed session, so it won't be something that's public. And they'll be talking with the county council about, whether they want to do something similar. And she also, kind of without even prompting, mentioned this other lawsuit filed by California's AG about the census. Mm-hmm. So they're arguing that they shouldn't ask a question about citizenship on the census. And so California is suing the Trump administration in that case. And so I'm not sure whether the county is saying that maybe they want to get involved in that too, but that's what it sounds like.
Yeah, and County Supervisor Diane Jacobs said she supports both of those at the Trump administration on both points. I looked at that census, the proposed language, and it says, it would say, what's your citizenship status? It would say, you were born here, you were naturalized here, or you're not a citizen. It doesn't say like you're necessarily an unauthorized immigrant, it just says you're not a citizen. But that'll be an interesting one to follow through. So it looks like they may weigh in on that. That'll trigger, of course, all the candidates for those spots to have to take sides and such. Nathan Fletcher already bashed it as a potential, right?
Yeah, I believe Omar Passons did as well. So it's definitely getting a lot of people fired up.
Do you think? I wonder if they'll actually do it. They might. If Kristen's usually the swing vote.
It seems strange that you would make this big announcement if you didn't think you had the votes or that it was going to happen. But she is, running for Congress. Maybe she's trying to get attention.
Yeah, she'll rocket to first place now. All right, so pay attention to that. That's local. Of course, we talk with a lot of local politicians about what their role is in weighing in on these bigger national issues and such. This is a significant one. All right, you may remember 12 years ago, when leaders of the San Diego County Regional Airport Authority asked voters to move the airport to Miramar. It did not go well.
No.
Not a good campaign. Proponents claimed that we were just a few years from total congestion at Lindbergh Field. They painted these pictures of, planes lined up and not able to get out. You wait for hours, a whole mess, compared to Stapleton Airport, the old airport of Denver. But last year we had more passengers than ever pass through San Diego International Airport, and it's still far from capacity. And that's obviously because they're cramming us into these airplanes.
Yeah, you're getting crammed tighter and tighter, and the planes are getting bigger also.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's an engineering advancement. Who knew? But they're packing planes fuller, and it's allowing this to grow without all that expansion. So we care. We wanted to do some more analysis about how things are going because there's this thing that's gotten more legs. We talked about it a couple weeks ago. Andy and I did, about Lorena Gonzalez Fletcher, the assemblywoman, who's put forward a bill to move the airport authority into the umbrella of the Port of San Diego, where it used to be. And we're trying to figure out why. And there's going to be some reporting on that in the politics report. But basically, the public arguments about why are we need to prepare for sea level rise, and the port is already doing that, so might as well do it for the airport too. And that they want to plan for transportation and access issues around the airport, and the port's already doing that. The port's right there. It's the airport's their largest tenant, so should make it happen. Yeah,
I mean, this is the third, I guess, government agency that she has talked about remaking via state legislation. There was Civic San Diego, there's been Sandag, and now this, so it's pretty interesting.
Yeah, and a lot of us are still trying to figure out the real why. What's the real why going on here? And we'll see. We'll keep digging for that. So watch for that. This airport thing, I think what we're going to start to see is the local business establishment, the people who work with the airport all the time, are happy with that. We've got Terminal 1 being developed. There's a lot of construction projects. Harbor Island or Harbor Drive is being rethought a little bit. So a lot of people don't want those to get delayed if they get distracted following these things. So pay attention to that. All right, another story did this week. This was a really powerful one Mario Coran had been working on for a while. So a stabbing at Lincoln High School in January. It made a lot of headlines, one of these that the local news all swarmed on. But no one has reported that it's the same student. The same student who did this was the one who stabbed a classmate had been caught with a knife on campus before that. And in that instance, officials decided that bringing the knife was a manifestation of the lack of impulse control caused by this student's disability. Now, if this had happened before 2014, the student likely would have been automatically suspended. But since the district moved toward a practice called restorative justice, educators are encouraged to lower suspensions, at least the rates, and for good reason. They had been doled out to minorities at a far greater proportion.
Yeah, very overwhelming rate. And so this new switch, it changed. There were some offenses for which you would automatically be suspended and some for which you would automatically be expelled, I think, also. And bringing weapons to school might have been on that list. And also the same goes with assaulting somebody who works at the school. And so Mario talked to, one long-term substitute teacher and also a former vice principal at the school, and they both said that they'd been assaulted during their time at Lincoln. And so he really not only uncovered just a pretty staggering amount of violence that's happening on the campus, but also the effect that this switch has had. And one thing that I think is really key to understanding this story is, so they made this switch to restorative justice, in which you try to tackle the underlying issues of why somebody's acting out, which is a great goal. But it doesn't appear that that effort has been fully funded or that trainings have been rolled out, at least district-wide, until really recently. And so there's been this period of years where they just had this sort of mandate to lower suspensions, but what do you do in the meantime?
Yeah, it was powerful testimony from that former vice principal who's like, look, you may agree with that, but they didn't do anything else.
Yeah.
They just said lower suspensions.
Right.
And so they weren't suspending kids, but then they were actually sending them home with what are called blue slips, which don't count as suspensions.
Right.
But they go
essentially a suspension by another name. They're just sent home for the day, basically, to kind of cool off.
It seems like we see this in so many different instances of government trying to set a goal and then creating these different incentives around it, right? Like the goal around this is laudable when people are suspended more often. First of all, they're kept out of school, which means they don't learn. And then second of all, it puts them on this path where, well, then they're behind, then it gets worse, and then it's called the school to prison pipeline for a reason.
Right.
And so but on the other hand, you do still have to do something else. And it looks like, and this substitute had this crazy story where he was saying basically, I didn't think that the violence could be as bad as they said it was until I went there and was assaulted myself. And so a very powerful story. Check it out at voicesandiego.org. Mario did some great investigative work on that and pulled together a lot of different threads. All right. And then far different settings. So in La Jolla, Pacific Beach, Ocean Beach, transformation is taking place. Builders are tearing down homes and putting up big new ones, except they're calling them remodels. So this is a story Andy Keats had on his list of things to do for months, right?
Can I clown on Andy for a second?
Please,
we always clown on you when you're gone, so it's only fair.
I'm in, man.
So when I left for maternity leave in December, this was wildly overdue.
Yeah.
So I log in for the very first time on Sunday night. What do we got for Monday? And it's this story that he's been working on. So good for him. He finally got it done.
He was busy while you were gone. Fair point. He was busy while you were gone.
Absolutely.
But he did have a way of, this was just eating his brain. It's sitting there for a while. Finally got it out. But it's a great story. I mean, these hundreds of homes across the coast are being supposedly remodeled. And everybody who lives around there knows, they'll leave up these skeleton of 2 or 3 walls that make it look like it's 50% of the building is still up. And it's called the 50% rule. So if they keep 50% of it up, they can get all their permits to do it at basically a year faster and $100,000 cheaper. So they're into that. And so they go through that whole process. But it's clearly a tear down and remodel. Some of these, this was great. He had a story in there about one guy who added on to the house, added a closet so that the house would be bigger, then tore it down and could consider it a remodel because it's now a remodel of a bigger house. And so they just wanted a bigger house, so they made it look like a remodel of a bigger house.
Yeah, one thing I took away from the story is that there's really no heroes in it. So the developers are obviously skirting this rule. They found a workaround. It violates, the spirit of this rule. And yet the people who are complaining about it and who are upset about it are people in the neighborhood who really sound as if they don't want anything new, any type of building
of
to
any
take
kind.
place
Yes.
at all.
Yeah.
He talked to one couple, a young couple who had just moved into the neighborhood, and, they said, what's the alternative? Just old houses that keep rotting away. We want to buy a house in your neighborhood. That's a good thing.
Yeah.
So yeah.
And another guy pointed out,
heroes.
the end result would have been the same. It just would have cost us $100,000 and gone a year later. And
right.
I think the neighbors would have been like, yeah.
Exactly.
But interesting coastal problems, obviously a first world elite problem, but it is transforming the look and feel of some of these areas. All right, now to an interesting developments in the county supervisor races. So we've talked a lot about District 4. This is probably the highest profile local race of the year, I think, right? This is Nathan Fletcher versus Omar Passons, Bonnie Dumanis, Lori Saldana, Ken Marlborough. They're running to replace Ron Roberts. But there's another county supervisor race, District 5. This is the north and northeast of San Diego County. It's represented by Bill Horn. We all know Bill Horn. 2 Republicans, Oceanside Councilman Jerry Kern, San Marcos Mayor Jim Desmond are favorites to replace him. But there's a new candidate, Jacqueline Arcevo, and she is a planning group member. But she's pulling a kind of Carl DeMille. She's running alongside a ballot initiative that might have some legs. Mm-hmm. So this is called the Safeguard Our San Diego Countryside Initiative. Now, we've talked a lot about Lilac Hills, right? Lilac Hills is this project near Valley Center. And the interesting thing about Lilac Hills is that this land was zoned for agriculture. A county general plan had come and said, this is the zoning for everything. This is agriculture. So they bought up all this land and when it's zoned for agriculture, it's worth less.
Yeah.
So they bought up all
less.
this land. Yeah. So they bought up all this land, and then they wanted to change it so they could build homes on it, which would make it much more valuable. And so that didn't get through the county supervisors, and then voters rejected it, and now they're trying again on it. And this initiative, if it were to pass, would say that if you don't conform to that general plan, you have to go to a vote no matter what, a vote of the people. And as we saw with Lilac Hills, that did not go well.
It didn't. And the general plan took a lot of time and a lot of money to go through.
Years. That was one of the first things I covered when I got to San Diego in 2003. It took like 15 years to get done. Now, so she's trying to ride the kind of coattails of this. She's like, look, this is obviously a Republican area, but maybe there's enough people who don't want to see these kinds of developments near them that they might rally for me.
Yeah, one thing I think is interesting is it's possible to like support this measure and be on either side of it, because you can just be anti-development and not want new stuff built, and therefore you would support this idea, this measure. But it's also possible to support development that is good, and you still don't want, these sprawl projects.
Right. I think one of the best points that Arshavod made was she said that the way things are, developers are actually incentivized not to follow the general plan like these Lilac Hills groups did, because all the land that's been zoned for denser development is now more expensive. Right. And so the real way to make a play is to try to get these things through in a different way if you really want to make a profit play. So this would disincentivize that. It's an interesting articulation of the concept. So look at this, county supervisors in the news, huh?
Yeah, so I've been thinking that this is maybe the most I've seen county supervisor issues in the news in the 5-6 years that I've been covering San Diego. Yeah. They were also in the news this week because of this resolution they passed to put tourniquets in public places.
Stop the bleed.
Yeah, so
it was
that
really macabre. Yeah.
If there's a mass shooting, the way defibrillators are in public places, there'd be tourniquets ready. Which is a really creepy thought.
It was really hard for me because I'm like, we had just did a show a week or two ago about them saying this is the safest San Diego's ever been in like 50 years, like 45 years or whatever. And yet prepare for bloodshed. Right. It's like, yikes, what are we doing?
Yeah, I mean, between mass shootings and Trump and, these development issues, it's like everything, all eyes on the county supervisors, which is not the way it normally goes.
No, about 80%, I've always said 70-80% of what the county supervisors do is mandated by the state. And so these opportunities to create controversy are usually limited, but they're figuring it out.
Yeah.
So, and now with, of course, candidates promising how they'd spend the money and do all these things, it's going to be a really interesting summer. So if you have questions or candidates you want us to consider or talk about on the show, stay tuned. We got the hero and goat. We've got Christian Ramirez coming on the other side of the break. But this has been the main show with News Radio 600 Kogo and our friends and partners over there.
The following is a sponsored segment from the ASU GSV Summit. Voice of San Diego is a nonprofit. The majority of our budget comes from grants and donations from readers and listeners like you. But we also rely on corporate and nonprofit sponsors that help us continue to produce more of the quality local journalism you expect from us. We're grateful for all those who invest in news. If you'd like to join them, contact development@vosd.org. I'm Kinsey Moreland, and I'm here with Deborah Quazzo. She is the co-founder of the ASU GSV Summit. Tell me first, what is the Summit and what's the history behind it? Why did you start this event?
The ASU GSV Summit is really meant to bring together global players, leaders from all over the world, who all are focused on innovation in the education and human capital sectors, and people who want to make an impact. We believe that innovation and the transformation of education and talent, as we like to call it, is the way that all people have access to the future. And we have a particular emphasis on the impact of technology in the learning and talent markets and how that can accelerate change and innovation. And so the intent is to really create an ecosystem and a community all around the elevation and celebration of improvements and innovations in these sectors.
Yeah, and this event is a big deal. It's been around for 9 years. How has it changed? I mean, you guys get some top names at this thing.
We've been very fortunate. Even in the early days, we sort of started in a very sweaty conference room at Arizona State University's Sky Song facility in Scottsdale. And even back then, we were fortunate to get people like Reed Hastings and Jeb Bush and others who were coming to talk to just 350 people or so. This year, we'll have over 4,000 people, and speakers like we'll have two presidents, President Bush and President Vicente Fox from Mexico.
Wow.
We'll have, I think, 6 governors. We have 2 former secretaries of education, the former secretary of commerce. We have over 400 technology CEOs from all over the world, large contingents from China, Latin America, Europe, India, and actually a nice contingent out of Africa. So it's really a very global convening of people who all care about driving better outcomes in the learning and talent space and improving people's lives at the end of the day.
Catch the rest of our sponsored interview with Deborah at the end of the show.
We're back. We are back in the great Voice San Diego podcast studio. This is Scott Lewis and my friend Sara Libby.
Hello.
Oh, it's so great. It's like a presence.
Here we are.
Yes. Our hero of the week.
This one goes to Callie Brown, Governor Jerry Brown's new dog. I really feel like he waited until I was back to... So Jerry Brown has a new puppy, which is awesome. But the best part about this was that he kind of rolled this announcement into a press release of government appointees. So there's, this person has been appointed to the energy board.
Know that, yeah.
And third on the list was Callie Brown, a
Deputy press dog.
board doodle. A
That's a
2-month board doodle has been appointed deputy first dog of California.
So this hit me hard, of course, because I had a dog named Callie, and she died last week. And so...
It's not just the circle of life, it's the circle of Callie's.
Exactly. So Callie is maybe it's really been incarnate. She's really stepped up.
Yeah,
now she's at the governor's mansion. She just had this little place in San Diego. People move up since it's like the... very hard losing a dog. I have to avoid. They're always there.
Oh, yeah.
I keep dropping food, and my son was eating those eggs the other day, dropping them all over the floor, and I'm like, where's the dog? And but we're starting to move past the void and hard part of it to remembering some good stuff. So probably get a dog soon. Dogs are great.
They're the best.
Aren't they the best?
The best.
Does your husband like your dog yet?
No. Hates him. Still hates him.
Come on, Vince. All right, our GOAT of the week.
You lose! Good day, sir!
All right, this week's GOAT goes to these guys. Boy, woo.
Real easy GOAT this week.
Yeah, this was an easy one. 97.3, The Machine. The Machine. San Diego always gets attention nationally for the dumbest things, and this week was no different. So as we moved up to opening day of the baseball season, there had been this rumbling scandal issue. The Dan Celio had left the mighty 1090s, well known for his misogyny. He's just bad. He's bad. It's just one of these shock jocks that's not even that funny, and has that same sort of approach about women. And he's even been accused of anti-Semitism. Just not good stuff, right? And he was hired at this new radio station. You actually had an experience with this. So tell us, you got a different perspective.
I have a different perspective than you and Andy would have about sports radio, baseball radio, is that I actually liked and regularly listened to the pop music station Energy that was on 97.3 up until 2 weeks ago. I miss you, Sonic and Tanya.
So wait, so one day you just turned on the radio and it was different?
Ozzy Osbourne was playing instead of Selena Gomez, and I was very upset.
How long did it take you to realize something had changed?
Immediately.
It's like Ozzy's not playing in that station no matter
exactly.
what. So Celio becomes the face of this program. Now, the reason 97.3 was this big deal is because it's the Padres station now. This is where the Padres, Ted Leitner, all those guys are on every day this summer or during games, is on this station. And so for the Padres, they're doing this whole, we're inclusive, we're multicultural. We're trying to make sure everybody feels comfortable being a Padres fan. And then they got Dan Celio leading the station. Then, as if it could get worse, it did. This guy, Kevin Kline, was supposed to debut his show on opening day. And to hype it, his team put out this picture, this meme of the Coronado Bridge, and he said, "Jump on it," and jump to a new radio station.
Yeah, it said "jump" very large and prominent.
Hey, don't joke about suicide.
Yeah, that's a good rule.
Just don't. And it showed a callousness to our community, because this is something a lot of people are aware of what happens on that bridge, and just how dark and scary, and what we need to do to address it, and all these moves and the discussion. It's having one of its worst years ever. This is not a thing that we're at a joking place with.
Yeah, and he also doubled down on it. It was almost just as gross.
Yeah, there was one guy who said, "This is terrible," and he wrote back, "Well, this was actually directed directly at you." Like, right. Come on. And then he doubled down again. He's like, "Oh, this is fun. I'm gonna have fun here." Finally, he's forced to apologize, clearly coerced. The Padres then, though, say, "We may not even have our games on this station again if you don't fix the tone and direction." Quite a row for the beginning of the opening day season, but 97.3, the machine, you get it. We made fun of you a little while ago with that great parody that the Kept Faith has been doing with the Bill the Dozer Bulldozer. A fantastic parody, but this has reached a point where they need a different direction. All right, listen to our interview now with Christian Ramirez, running for District 8. We are joining the great Voice San Diego podcast studio by Christian Ramirez. He's running for City Council, District 8 in the city of San Diego. Welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for coming in. Tell us a little bit about yourself. What do you do, and what are you hoping to do?
Well, I've been a community advocate for over 20 years. I focus mainly on border and immigration issues and advocated at the national level to ensure that border communities are treated with dignity and respect. But I grew up in District 8. I moved to District 8 from Tijuana when I was 8 years old, and now 4 generations of my family live in this district. It's where I grew up. It's where I'm raising my family, and I've actually grown up in virtually every single community in District 8. I lived in San Isidro for a long time, then in Nestor, in Logan Heights for about 15 years, and now I have a home in Sherman Heights where I'm raising my son with my wife of 18 years.
And where did you go to school? Where did you go to high school?
I went to Southwest High, in the southwesternmost southwesternmost high school in the continental United States. I went to Mar Vista Middle, just down the street, and then went over to San Diego State.
Well, good. And you, for work right now, what do you do?
Well, I work for Alliance San Diego. I'm on leave from Alliance San Diego, and I've been doing that work for about 6 years with them. And I ran their border and immigration federal policy issues. Been to Congress so many times that I can't remember now. And I'm so glad that I'm spending my time here in my community instead of sort of knocking on doors in D.C. where folks rarely listen to what we have to say.
Alliance, I know what Alliance does, and I'm sure a lot of people listening do, but tell us what the purpose of Alliance San Diego is.
Well, Alliance San Diego has focused for the past decade in lifting up the voices of communities in the city of San Diego to increase civic participation, to ensure that law enforcement agencies are held accountable. And I've joined Alliance because I believed in their mission. Mm-hmm. And now I want to make sure that I continue to drive that message of hope in our community by hopefully being the next council member that represents District 8.
Yeah, we've had Andrea Guerrero in the studio before. Sure. She's a very prominent, interesting person. Well, good. Welcome. So we had Antonio Martinez last week, and I'm sure we're going to get Vivian Moreno in at some point. Yep. What makes you stand out compared to them?
Well, the fact that 4 generations of my family live in the district, that I've spent over 20 years fighting for District 8 communities, that I have the ability to be firm with my principles and my values, and at the same time understand that in policymaking, you have to compromise. There are serious issues that impact District 8, and those issues have remained unresolved for generations. When I was a kid, I was diagnosed with lymphoma because of the lowering of environmental standards and in Otay Mesa, where I grew up. As an adult, I was diagnosed with asthma. And it's shameful that, 40 years later, Otay Mesa, Logan Heights, and Barrio Logan are among the most polluted communities in the county of San Diego, all in District 8. So I have a 4-year-old kid now, and I want to make sure that he grows up in a healthy, clean environment. And that's really the reason why I am running for office. I have the 20-year track record of standing up for this community, and it's simply what my opponents don't have in this race.
We had a conversation last week with Antonio Martinez about that. I'm just going to jump right in because I find that interesting. I asked him specifically whether the shipbuilding industry was compatible with the housing that we all suspect will grow in Barrio Logan. Can they work together?
Well, I think that we need to bring folks to the table. But the reality is that the shipyard industry has polluted Barrio Logan for far too long. And there has to be a balance. Yeah, certainly a lot of good jobs came out of that industry. There were union jobs, good paying jobs. A lot of folks were able to get out of poverty working there, but the cost has been too high. It's time to have a buffer between industry and residents. It's time to reinvest in Barrio Logan and Logan Heights. It's time to have a zoning that resembles the rest of the city of San Diego. And for 40 years. Folks in Barrio Logan, over 40 years now, folks in Barrio Logan have demanded to be treated with the same sort of dignity that other neighborhoods in San Diego have enjoyed. And that hasn't come to fruition yet. So my hope is that we're able to begin to clean Barrio Logan, be able to ensure that we keep Barrio Logan as a residential area, and that we put to end the shameful practice of setting up toxic pollutants next to residential areas.
So I got a couple things on that. So first of all, to be clear, let's say that you passed a plan that put forward the full buffer. No more compromises, no additional shifting that the size or what's allowed to be there, just a full out buffer. If that were to happen, are you then comfortable with the shipyards continuing to exist and operate there in perpetuity on the other side of the buffer?
Well, that was the plan that was agreed upon, many years ago, and folks in Barrio Logan fought for that. They brought the shipyard industry to the table. We sat down and we talked about what the best path forward was. And unfortunately, we were referendized and we had to go up against the city. I think that there are reasonable demands from the residents of Barrio Logan to continue to have good paying jobs, but not at the expense of the health and the quality of life of Barrio Logan. So I think the shipyard industry can remain there if they are good neighbors. And for generations, that hasn't been the case. It's time to treat the city of San Diego as a reasonable broker to ensure that America's finest city is a model that all communities live up to. And that's certainly not the case in Barrio Logan.
And so then the other thing that I think is often lost in the discussion, mostly because it's a pretty complex ordeal, is even if the community plan were passed tomorrow, everyone who exists today gets grandfathered in.
That's right.
And they would be able to continue to exist forever so long as they don't have closed down for some period, which is actually a pretty long time frame, or try to expand. So are you comfortable with that, or do you think there should be some sort of mechanism to actually shut down some of the businesses? Not the shipyard necessarily, but the smaller industrial operators that are interspersed throughout the community?
Well, I think if we have industry that's set up next to an elementary school, next to a church, next to somebody's backyard, that we need to take a serious look at that. And began to treat Barrio Logan as though we are living in the 21st century. Nothing like that exists in the city of San Diego except for Barrio Logan. And I think that certainly, there's a grandfather clause that we've supported. I was a strong supporter of Propositions B and C when they came to the ballot, and that was part of the compromise. But that being said, that's not going to stop me. I think that we have an obligation to ensure that our children in Barrio Logan have an opportunity to live in a clean community, have access to the Bay, which is a longstanding demand of the residents of Barrio Logan since their community was devastated by the building of the Coronado Bridge and the expansion of I-5 so many generations ago. So I think that I'm going to be that champion that says, let's look at heavy industry in Barrio Logan and District 8, and let's begin to clean it up. It's going to be a process. It's going to be, but we need to start someplace. And our starting point were Propositions B and C that unfortunately failed, in the ballot. But now we have an opportunity to begin to transform Barrio Logan into the healthy, wonderful community that it deserves to be.
One of the things that struck me about both Vivian Moreno's page and Antonio Martinez's page was the emphasis on police. Alliance San Diego has been involved in discussions about criminal justice issues and other things. There is a big emphasis from both sides that they need more police and that they support the police. And Antonio was touting his endorsement of the police, the union. What do you think about the state of public safety and policing in your district?
Well, it's no surprise that residents in District 8 have been victims of racial profiling. Not only do we have not enjoyed a good relationship with the police department historically, but if you add to that the heavy presence of federal law enforcement in our community, particularly Border Patrol, this has created a gap between our community and law enforcement. It's a gap that we must close. That gap undermines public safety, erodes trust between community members and police officers. And I want to help bridge that gap. But we have to first acknowledge that racial profiling does exist in our community. We have to acknowledge that particularly men of color are targeted by folks in law enforcement. And until we acknowledge that and are able to live with that and move forward, it's not going to be easy to close that gap. There are a couple of incidents that I could point to in which the previous chief of police did not listen to our community. And one was when President Trump came, or he was then candidate Trump, came to San Diego, and there was a counter protest outside the convention center, and police officers in riot gear descended upon Barrio Logan on a Friday afternoon. I was there with my son after a peaceful rally, and this was an occupation of police forces in Barrio Logan when all we did was march peacefully. And when we brought this up to then Chief Zimmerman, they completely ignored the serious concerns that community members had when we had small tanks and police and riot gear descending upon a residential area. That's the kind of behavior that we need to put an end to. I look forward to working with the new chief of police to ensure that we begin to build the trust that has been lost as a result of the poor handling of the police department by the previous chief.
Do you think we need more police?
I think we need accountable policing. I think that we need to ensure that public safety responds to the needs of the community. We need to ensure that police officers are adequately trained to ensure that we live in a modern, multicultural, multilingual city. And certainly in some areas we do need additional law enforcement, but we need to first make sure that we have the right kinds of officers patrolling our communities, and that we begin to reinvest in community policing and not just in policing that is not held accountable by the community.
A few years ago, the City Council adopted new community plan updates in the southeastern area. Specifically, I think its most influential change was increasing the opportunities for new development along the orange line that runs through basically along commercial. That hasn't turned into a great swell of private activity in that area yet. Although, I spent some time down there, and you're starting to see some things that look like the early goings of some private activity. What are you, once you were in the city council, what would be the types of projects you're looking to encourage there? What does it need? What is your vision for what a thriving commercial corridor along that transit stop would look like?
Commercial Avenue and Imperial Avenue are missed opportunities in the city of San Diego. These are important corridors that can potentially bring tourist dollars into our district. Part of the problem is that communities in Logan Heights and Sherman Heights don't have a planning group. We're attached to the Southeast Planning Group, and that's shameful. We need to make sure that, just like Barrio Logan and other communities in District 8, Sherman Heights and Logan Heights are able to have their own planning group, and I will work tirelessly to ensure that happens. That's been a long-standing demand of residents in Sherman Heights and Logan Heights, and until we do that, we're always going to be viewed as sort of a the minority point of view in the Southeast Planning Group. So my focus will be to ensure that we bring in new business owners who are now popping up in on Imperial Avenue, new residents who are now moving into places like Grant Hill and Sherman Heights, and fold them into the decision-making process. We have not had a strong voice in the Southeast Planning Group. We need to have our own planning group so that we then begin to look at Imperial Avenue and turn Imperial Avenue into a walkable, bikeable avenue that brings in folks from the Petco Park and the Convention Center, and enjoy the wonderful places to eat and drink some coffee on Imperial Avenue and on Commercial Avenue. I want to make sure that we turn Commercial Avenue into a place in which we could have additional housing, we could have additional commercial areas, so that we begin to take a look at opportunities that are popping up, for instance, in Barrio Logan along Logan Avenue, and that's a great model to follow, and begin to invest on Imperial Avenue and on Commercial Avenue, and also in San Isidro Boulevard down in the southern part of the district. These are important commercial corridors that have been abandoned by the city of San Diego. It's time to revitalize them. It's time to turn them into tourist destinations and re-inject some life into these wonderful communities in District 8.
We've talked to a lot of candidates now over the last couple of months, and we always ask some version of the same question about the role of private development of housing. You mentioned housing and an affordability crisis and the need for housing. What's the right balance, or what's the right role of market rate housing?
Well, we need to encourage more development in District 8. The reality is that there's only one place to build, and that's up. So we need to have more density in our communities. That comes with a price, and we need to strike a right balance. A lot of folks are concerned that that's going to take away from the character of single-family units that have characterized places like Barrio Logan and Sherman Heights for a long, long time. But the reality is that if we're going to maintain the cultural heritage of these communities and prevent full gentrification of these communities, we need to allow for more density in these communities. And my hope is that we begin to bring in interesting projects. Like one example that I always point to is what Habitat for Humanity did on Harrison Avenue and Commercial Avenue. It's a small project. I think it's about 6 or 7 dwellings, but that's the kind of thinking outside the box that we need in the city of San Diego to ensure that folks from Barrio Logan, Logan Heights, and Sherman Heights are able to still afford to live there. We have a lot of renters in the northern part of District 8. The same is true in some of the communities in the southern part of the district. But we need to ensure that we invite developers to come to our district, so long as we have an opportunity to have affordable housing for folks who have been longtime renters in our community. I've talked to some of my supporters in District 8, and some of these folks have been renting for 40, 50 years in the same property. And they're sitting on a time bomb. It's just a matter of time before they get pushed out. So what do we do with these folks so that they don't get displaced? District 8 suffered a whole lot of displacement after Petco Park was built. We need to look at what happened in the past and ensure that we have a plan in place that allows renters to remain in District 8 and promotes home ownership. It's not an easy thing to solve. I know the city only plays a small part in that, but what we can do as a city is to ensure that we help move forward policies that take into consideration renters, homeowners, and encourage development, so long as it's sustainable, so long as it promotes affordable housing.
Yeah, that's interesting. So what you mentioned was that supporting the increased supply of housing could be a way to actually protect the cultural heritage. We often hear it as the opposite, of a fear of gentrification. But if you make sure that people can stay there, maybe that culture stays as well, as what you're saying.
That's exactly what I'm saying. I think if we build more homes, then the prices of homes will drop or will stabilize, and folks will be able to remain, living in places that they grew up in, as opposed to, making the decision to go across the border and live in Tijuana, which a lot of folks in District 8 or former residents of District 8 now have to do. Mm-hmm. So I believe that with the right plan, taking advantage of the transportation hubs that we already have in District 8, fact that a lot of folks work in downtown, that we can have increased density so that we allow that to stabilize the market in terms of housing, and we allow folks to remain residents of the beautiful communities of District 8.
So with Alliance, you are the specialist for border-related issues, and you mentioned you spent a lot of time in D.C. talking about those sorts of things. What's the city of San Diego's role? If you would be the representative for the border district in the largest city on the border. What is the role of a local official on border issues?
Well, San Diego is uniquely situated to be a champion on border policy at the federal level. Just a couple of days ago, President Trump visited our region and touted, his prototypes that we paid for as taxpayers. And not only that, but the city of San Diego spent, I think, another $2 million guarding those prototypes with, additional police personnel in those areas. I think that the city of San Diego needs to do a better job in lifting up the fact that we are an integrated binational region, that we depend tremendously and the cultural exchanges, the economic exchanges between Tijuana and San Diego. At least 50,000 people cross the border every single day. This is who we are as San Diegans. We're proud of our binational identity. We're proud of being on the border. And the city of San Diego can be at the forefront in pushing back against the rhetoric of divisiveness and of hatred, frankly, that sometimes comes out of the White House. And by pointing to the fact that San Diego is among the safest cities in the country, that we enjoy a tremendous friendship with the folks on the other side of the border. And that's what I bring to the table. I know how to talk about these issues. I've advocated for these issues. I've been consulted by members of Congress on how to move forward sensible border enforcement policies so that we take into account the security concerns that we have in the region, but we not at the expense of eroding the economic engine that we are in this region, not only on the U.S.-Mexico border, but really globally. This is one of the largest binational metropolitan areas in the world, and we have an opportunity to take advantage of that and push back against the rhetoric of fear and wall building that the President Trump has been promoting.
When you talk about doing more, I mean, it seems to me the Mayor Faulkner has touted and has campaign events, or not campaign events, official events with the Mayor of Tijuana. He's a couple weeks ago he had one with the Mayor of Mexicali. He's the Chamber of Commerce has done binational trade discussions and talked about the importance of the region. What is it that we're not doing, or what is it specifically that you think we could do more of?
Well, we need to hold Border Patrol accountable. This is the largest law enforcement agency in the country, and perhaps one of the largest in the county of San Diego. A big bulk of those agents are operating in our communities in District 8, in the city of San Diego as a whole. This agency has the power to enter into private property without a warrant if you're 25 miles from the border. Within 100 miles, Border Patrol can operate checkpoints, can go into schools, can go into places of worship. We need to send a strong message that the largest law enforcement agency in this country should be held accountable and be able to operate in the same way that our local police does, without abusing people's rights, without taking advantage of their powers. And the other piece is that we need to start investing in federal dollars and cleaning up our environment. It's shameful that, I grew up not very far from the Tijuana River Valley, and as a kid, I remember the smells of that river. And, it's been 34 years later, and we still have the same problem. So we need someone that not just focuses on the commercial aspects, the economic ties that we have with Tijuana, and Mayor Faulkner does an amazing job in being a champion. I think as a Republican mayor, it's important that we lift that up. But we also need to look at the environmental concerns that we have, at the human rights issues that we have faced. Customs and Border Protection is the first agency that tourists that come to watch the Padres play at Petco or shop in one of our outlets. That's the first agency that they see. And oftentimes at the ports of entry, folks are subjected to shameful practices, harassment and abuse. That needs to end. And we need to begin to promote the idea that in the San Diego-Tijuana region, we need law enforcement that is held accountable and that it's not abusive in order for us to continue to cherish the sort of ties that we have with our friends on the other side of the border.
Is there a city council member on the council right now that you particularly identify with? That's the kind of model you would want to be, or maybe better than, but that's the person that you really look up to?
Look, I think that as a council member, we need to ensure that we work well with all members of the council. But I've looked at Georgette Gomez from District 9, and I've seen how she was passionate about advocating for her community, how she put in the hard work of making sure that we push for the right policies, and they weren't always successful, but she never relented, and she continued to move forward. And I think that that's the kind of passion that I'm going to bring to the council. But I also know that it's not just through passion that we move policy. We need to ensure that we work well with the rest of the council members, and that we point to the fact that there's a historical debt that's owed to communities south of Interstate 8, particularly communities south of the 94. And if we're going to be truly America's finest, then we need to focus on those communities. I have a good relationship with all council members. As a community advocate, I haven't always agreed with some of them, but my hope is that what I bring to the table is not just passion, but my ability to really, go across the aisle and even talk to folks on the Democratic side of the council and say, look, we have to focus on working class communities if we're going to move forward as a city. But Georgette Gomez, without a doubt, is someone that I look up to and that I really admire for her dedication and her willingness to not succumb to political pressure, but to move forward an agenda and also compromise. And my hope is that I could live up to her standards.
Do you think David Alvarez has done a good job in that seat that you're running for?
I think David has done as much as he could for the city for District 8. I think that oftentimes, political ambitions may have gotten in the way of reaching the sort of agreements that we needed in the council to improve the quality of life of District 8. And that's not what I'm about. I have a 20-year track record of being a community advocate. I'm not seeking, I'm sure other politicians do the same thing. I'm not seeking to climb up the ladder in politics. I want to make sure that I represent my community. And I think that David certainly has advocated for our community, but I think sometimes political ambition may have gotten in the way of putting the community first, and that may have had a negative consequence in the quality of life of our residents.
What's a specific example when you think political ambition might have impacted a decision for District 8?
It's no secret. I supported David when he was running for mayor, and I thought that was the best decision. But after we lost that campaign, I think it was time for us to go back and make amends and try to point towards a brighter future for District 8. And as a result of that not happening, we are in a situation in which now the mayor, perhaps out of spite, is pushing policy solutions or policy recommendations that have a negative impact on our community in District 8. I think that's one example. I think that the constant bickering and infighting inside the Democratic Party and different factions within the Democratic Party have put communities at a disadvantage. Our communities are in desperate need of having the kind of investment that that other residents enjoy in the city of San Diego. And folks don't care about which faction in the Democratic Party or in Labor is winning. Folks care about making sure that the streets are on, making sure the streets are paved, making sure that the police are not harassing them, and that's simply not happening. I think I'm a Democratic Party outsider, and I think that that's what we need now. We don't need any more of the bickering. We don't need any more of the factional tension that exists within the left in San Diego. We need someone that's serious about fighting for the community, and my record speaks for itself.
Well, Christian Ramirez, candidate for District 8, thanks for coming in.
Thank you so much.
And now back to our sponsored interview with Deborah Quazzo, co-founder of the ASU GSV Summit. So it's this huge global event, and you've chosen to host it in San Diego this year, April 16th through 18th. What made you choose San Diego?
We were in Phoenix for many years, and that was terrific. And we really had outgrown the space, and we really did a canvas of the entire country, and ended up. It was very clear at the end of the day that San Diego was the right city for us. It represents innovation. It's got a fantastic tech and biotech and otherwise communities around forwardness innovation. It's also got a fantastic education community. Everything from K-12 up through obviously the university system is spectacular. It's also a pretty unique city, and we've been so impressed with how the inherent collaboration between K-12, higher education, and workforce occurs. We've been very fortunate to have a wonderful partnership with Peter Kallstrom and the Workforce Board in San Diego, and we actually have a panel about it at the summit highlighting the smart city nature of San Diego, and that a lot of work is done to connect the dots between the various learning and work systems that exist in and around the city. So it's a pretty perfect place. It's beautiful. Obviously, the weather's fantastic. The water's gorgeous. The views out of the hotel are fantastic, even if you're not out, swimming or whatever. So it's a breathtakingly beautiful, but also importantly, really a heartbeat of innovation that is happening in San Diego that aligns really well with what we're doing.
So the New York Times once called the ASU GSV Summit a must-attend event. So what makes it must-attend this year? What are some of the courses or talks that are happening? What's the biggest draw this year?
Yeah, I think it has been a must-attend event. We expect somewhere between 3,700 and 4,000 people. It tends to be senior-level people. We're particularly proud of it because we really curate communities. We want to make sure that in the pre-K-12 segment, we not only have education technology CEOs, but we also have leading innovators in the school district. So superintendents and principals who are leading dramatic change in districts all around the country. So we effectively create marketplaces where people can have really important conversations to move innovation forward. We do the same thing in the higher education space. We'll have a couple of hundred leaders of higher education. We also have 150 or so CEOs of technology companies operating in that space, and the same in the enterprise. So we've worked very hard this year to deepen our representation from the HR side of things, the enterprise buyer of HR technology and talent technology products. So we have a terrific group of people coming from all over the country representing amazing companies who will be on panels discussing the future of work, the impact of millennials in the workforce, the impact of AI, and machine learning, obviously a topic that will be discussed across all of the pre-K-12, higher education, and enterprise. Everyone's certainly talking about the impact that artificial intelligence and machine learning can have, and it will certainly have big impacts in all of those areas, and it is already. So that will be a big part of our conversation. So what we're really trying to do is keep our eyes on the future, and we'll have actually on the bottom floor we have what we're calling Future Lab. We'll have a whole host of companies from drones to robots to other holograms to other things on display down on the bottom floor in our future lab. So again, giving people a tactile sense for what's happening in the advancing technologies around those areas. So we really try to keep our eye on the horizon and have the event represent future, what the future looks like. And real conversations happen. I mean, we have people come to the summit who, end up having 40 meetings because there's so many great people to meet with. Mm-hmm. And so it's an incredibly efficient place for people who want to get things done. And then we have lots of people who, of course, want to be there for the incredible content. We have literally, close to 900 people involved in the program, individual speakers, panels. And we're going to be talking about critical issues across each of the areas, whether it's the personalized learning and what that means in the K-12 segment, whether it's the transformation of publishing technology in the higher education segment and how it's going to impact students very rapidly, or whether it's the MOOC phenomenon, the massive online open courseware. We have a panel with all the MOOC leaders, or many of the MOOC leaders, including Chinese Shenhua University's MOOC CEO, coming to talk about what the future of those organizations looks like and what impact they're going to have on learning in the going forward. So it's a widespread of things. But I think generally people get very excited to be together with people they would be with and people they would not get in, typically be in a room with, and be able to have conversations with those people. And that part's very important to us.
So it sounds fascinating to anyone, but is it entrepreneurs, educators, researchers, and investors, or who are the type of people that are showing up?
Yeah, I think we are particularly proud that it really is not a monolithic event. It is. We have always sort of jokingly called it a strange cocktail of community, and so it's kind of all of the above. We'll have we'll have over probably 350 or so investors. We'll have over roughly the same number of higher education leaders, roughly the same number of K-12 education leaders. We'll have over 400 technology CEOs, and then we have all the major technology players, the large technology players in the sector like IBM and Microsoft and Google and Apple and others. And so it really is that aspect of it that we bring together people who would not naturally be, convene. Right. That has made this event different. So it's not a philanthropic conference. It's not an investor conference. It's not just a pure tech CEO conference. So it's really all of the above, and it's that mix that actually I think makes it unique in the landscape, and also makes it more efficient and probably more powerful for people to come to. And then to your point, the agenda is pretty extraordinary in terms of just learning. And so for someone coming in off the street who cares a lot about educational and workforce outcomes, it's just a great stimulating place to be because the conversations are fantastic.
So the 9th annual ASU GSV Summit will be held in San Diego April 16th through 18th this year. How do people register for the event, and where can they sort of see the schedule and learn more about it?
We have the website, asugsvsummit.com. There is a discounted rate, a deeply discounted rate for not-for-profit attendees. We have a large chunk of our attendees are importantly from the not-for-profit segment across we call it the pre-K to gray arc of learning and talent. So you can sign up at the website. The program is on the website. We've also just launched our app yesterday, and anyone can pull that down from the App Store and go there to be able to navigate. But the program itself is all up on the website, and we're making tweaks daily, but it is up there for the most part. It's exciting. We have opening keynote Monday night is President George Bush. On Tuesday we have John Legend. We're going to have an amazing conversation around social justice prior to John coming on. Then on Wednesday night, we actually have President Fox, as well as Matthew McConaughey, who is doing incredible work through his foundation with he and his wife around serving high school students in need, and just has done some terrific work there. So we're excited about the lineup, and at a high level, we're excited about every piece of it. So.
All right. Well, Deborah Quazzo, co-founder of ASU GSV Summit, thanks so much for joining us.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thanks for listening to Voices San Diego podcasts. This show is part of the Voices San Diego podcast network. Visit voiceofsandiego.org/podcasts. There, you'll learn more about our award-winning arts and education podcast, CultureCast and Good Schools for All, the Cura Chaos podcast about movers and shakers on both sides of the border, Beer Talk Radio, our business show, I Made It in San Diego, our sports show, The Kept Faith, and the rest of the shows in the network. Voices San Diego is a nonprofit. The majority of our budget comes from grants and donations from readers and listeners like you. If you like the show, please take a minute to go to voicessandiego.org and click the donate button. Or if you have a business and would like to sponsor the show, contact development@voicessandiego.org or call 619-550-5664.